Okay, so we've talked about why people are saying that they want to defund the police, and we've unpacked a lot of arguments there. Now, I do want to talk about some arguments against defunding the police. One of the arguments is pretty obvious and logical, and that is less money for the police, less police officers, less people policing equals more crime, right? I watched the testimony of Pastor Darrell Scott of Cleveland when he testified for the House hearing on police reform. He was making the very reasonable argument of don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Yes, there are problems that we need to address, but you can't just throw out the whole policing system. I pointed to Cleveland as an example of when their city cut funding to the police department, rates of crime increase, and he says that Cleveland is now a very unsafe place to live where it used to be a much safer city before funding cuts. I mean, that totally makes sense. I think that's probably the most logical argument, and I think that's where people are coming from when they're like,
Defund the what?
what the what?
What do you mean?
One question that I do have about this specific example of Cleveland that Mr. Scott made is whether the funding that was cut was used to then fund other social services in Cleveland, or was it simply cut because they didn't have money to pay all the bills and they had to do budget cuts? And I don't know the answer. I'm gonna look it up. What I would say, if that money is simply being taken away and not reallocated, is that one major tenet of defunding the police is taking money out and then reinvesting that money into communities. If money is only being taken out of the police department and there's no additional funds going into economic opportunity and affordable housing and education, mental health care, addiction care, then I could see why crime would go up. But it could have been reallocated, and I'm just not sure. So that's one thing that I'm looking into, and that's a nuance of this whole thing that's really important to think about, is not just the taking away of money, but the putting in of the money. I read an opinion piece by Errol G. And he is a former FBI special agent. He was saying that defunding the police could actually make things worse for people of color. What he argued is that when funding cuts are put on the table to police departments, the things that they're going to be cutting are not tasers and guns and tear gas and pepper spray, surveillance. What they're going to be defunding is community programs and the extra initiatives that actually do a lot of good, especially for kids in low income neighborhoods who don't see a whole lot of opportunity for them. So that was his argument. It is definitely something to think about. So a lot of you have probably heard of the rape kit backlog, and if you haven't, what it is basically that thousands and thousands of rape kits go untested for years after they have originally been collected after a sexual assault. This backlog of rape kits takes away any possibility of this woman receiving justice, of the offender being caught, being put in jail, or having to register on a sex offender list. When the rape kit isn't tested, it just is useless evidence sitting in a lab. This is a huge problem. So one thing that I have been thinking about in this whole defunding the police thing is whether defunding the police would make it even harder for these rape kits to ever be tested, to ever be seen through to final results, to ever result in justice. That is certainly something that I have qualms about. The other thing would be in instances of social workers and mental health care providers dealing with various calls, like 911 calls. Should a situation escalate, would that individual be equipped to handle it? Would it become unsafe for them? Would they have the proper de-escalation techniques? Having social workers and healthcare professionals being the sole responders gives me pause, and that's why I'm just thinking about if something did escalate. That being said, I don't think that police should be the first responders or the only responders, because I think that in a lot of instances they're not the best person to deal with issues of mental health problems or drug addiction or homelessness, but they're being asked to do that. In situations like this, I'm just wondering if there's room for some kind of compromise. Like, could it be that one social worker and one police officer work in teams? The person who's trained in mental health can kind of do their thing and work with this person as a patient, as a human, and the officer could be there to back them up in case it got violent. I know people went into law enforcement to do good. I think of it as the same kind of way that I think about politicians. I think a lot of politicians, maybe not a lot, I think at least half, went into public service to serve the public, to do good. And the problem is, once they want to get elected to do that good, then shit gets real, because the truth is, it's a game where you have to pay to play. When it costs such an exorbitant amount of money to enter and win an election, there's no possible way that you can do it without making promises to people. I think a lot of politicians want to do good for their constituents, but the problem happens because the system is so flawed that they're working within, that to even get in, you have to be a player in it. And so even with the best intentions and the best heart, you can end up doing things that you didn't set out to do. And I think that the same thing can happen within police departments. That's not to say that every officer is doing something illegal or wrong. I really don't believe that. But I think that if there's no acknowledgement of the systemic issues, that there's bigger problems than just one person, then we can't fix it without calling it a problem. And it's just getting really hard to ignore. And the whole bad apple thing is getting hard to swallow. It just doesn't seem reasonable to me or logical that there would be so many instances of like one individual bad person. And if there is, then the systemic problem is hiring. An argument against is that it's not doable. We can't do it, right? But there are a few examples. So in Minneapolis, the city council has voted in a supermajority, meaning it is veto proof, to defund their police department. They don't know exactly what that will look like. I keep looking for updates, but they don't have a fully fleshed out plan. Their plan generally is to take funding out of the police departments, put it into other social services in their communities. What that will look like, I don't know, but they're doing it. The mayor of LA announced that he would cut a huge amount of money from the LAPD, and that might have seemed impossible before, but it's not. There's an organization called Cahoots in Eugene, Oregon, and this organization is a third-party organization made up of mental health care workers, social workers, and specialists who respond to 911 calls that have to do with issues of mental health, addiction, homelessness, suicide, things like that. So this is just one example of a community that is integrating a separate organization for various items within the community that right now are taken care of by police, but proponents say could be taken care of by other means. So I can't give you an answer of what is right and what is wrong. I just wanted to give you an overview of the argument so it didn't sound so like radical and scary. Maybe it still sounds radical to you. That's not for me to say. For me, I'm still muddling through this issue. I'm still getting research. I'm still reading. I'm trying to read both sides. I really want to be educated on this and not just like throw my voice in to be loud. I really want to have a thoughtful opinion when I have fully formed one. So I'm doing the work inside. I'm trying to get educated on this. I encourage all of you to do the same. Think with your hearts, think with your brains, read sources. And if you have creative solutions, you should tell someone. You should put it out on social media, but you should really call, make emails, send snail mail. Really, that takes too long, just email. I hope that you found this video useful if you were kind of struggling with this issue like I have been. If you did like this video, please go ahead and hit that thumbs up. If you guys would like to tune in for more activism related content, please go ahead and click that subscribe. This is my personal journey. I am learning how to become a better ally, advocate, and activist, and I'm just sharing stuff I learn along the way. If you want to come for that journey, I would love to have you. Thanks y'all for stopping by. Activism on the fly. Peace and love.